Hello, Glitch Reaper here. I'm back with some more Magic Duels, and as you can see, it's a bit offline again, but that's perfectly fine because I'm still just showing off the basics. So, in this case, it'll be a bit more than basic level because I'll be going into some of the more advanced stuff at, just a moment. Hey, you auto reset. Okay. As I was saying, trying to go into more advanced things, I've covered the basics here. But I haven't really gone into the more advanced lessons. And originally I was thinking of doing this just one thing at a time, but then I realized that because certain sets tended to add certain things together as a group, it'd be good to go over what was added with various sets, actually. So I'm going to go through here for a moment, and then I should be able to remember what I was... Yeah, okay. Remember exactly what I was going to do. Okay, one of the more recent sets, and the latest one that's actually included in Magic Duels, is Amonkhet, which has a very much Egyptian theme. It does have a few interesting tweaks having to do with it, and in a way it kind of harkens back to the original set, in that having kind of a desert area theme. While Amonkhet is based on Egypt specifically, one of the original expansions was Arabian Nights, which was kind of based on desert areas as well, although a bit more in general and not necessarily just based on Egyptian mythology. So this is going to be a bit more specific than that, but I think they put the theme together really well. So when I go through the skill quest, you'll be seeing some of the cards from Amonkhet, and therefore you'll be able to see kind of what I mean. And while some of the abilities may not fully fit in with Egyptian mythology, they, for the most part, do fit in overall with the set because it's put together pretty well. There's three special abilities that very specifically go with Amonkhet. We have Embalm, Exert, and Aftermath. Out of these three, I'll be going over Aftermath first. And as you can see, I've already done that, but it wouldn't matter anyhow, because whenever you're offline, you can't earn money in-game, so yeah. I'm going into this one, so I'll go over Aftermath, Exert, and Embalm. Get some time to read this and or listen to that if it's actually getting through. Okay, I think, well, I'm not hearing the volume as much, but again, Steam does weird things, so I need to actually do the audio bit. Just making sure. Okay, I can hear that part. Okay, now this setup has it where currently I've got a pretty good amount of land to provide mana for my spells right now. My enemy is currently playing a Shimmer Scaled Drake, which has flying and can be cycled, although cycling is one of those things that I'm not even sure if it actually has a lesson for. I think it does, so if it does, I'll go over that later. It's actually a much older ability, and I can kind of check to see if it's there because it's something that's kind of brought back more in this set, but it is actually much older. Now, in this case, I have the ability to do a couple things with this card. the ability Aftermath is kind of like a general set of abilities, really. What it means is you have a card that is specifically able to be played from the graveyard, and only from the graveyard can be played in that form. Now I'm going to zoom in on this one here and show what I mean there, if I can zoom. Otherwise I'll have to let that continue. Okay, now I can zoom in. But this one is an instant effect called Start, where you create two 1/1 white warrior creature tokens with vigilance. And that means overall that I'll be creating two token creatures with 1 point of power, 1 point of toughness. They'll be colored white. They'll be considered a warrior is their subtype, creature is their primary type, and they will have a special ability called Vigilance. Vigilance means that they do not have to tap to attack. So, quick note on that one. As for tokens, that's pretty much what it sounds like. They're not necessarily permanents that are in an actual card form. They're just kind of created on the spot. And if I go to the other side of this card, and whenever you see this little symbol here in the game, you'll know that you can flip between sides of a card that has two sides. We'll see the Aftermath ability. This is known as Finish, and note that the costs may be a bit different between the face that you start with and the one that you use from the graveyard. From the graveyard, it'll take 2 generic mana and 1 black, but that is if you use this Aftermath ability. Aftermath allows you to cast it from the graveyard, but then you also have to exile it. And that means it's basically removed from the game, for the most part. It's separate from the graveyard in a way, and there are some things that can pull things back out of exile, but they're pretty rare. So usually whenever something's been exiled, you can pretty much say it's dead gem. So once you choose to use this ability, it is just completely used up. Again, with very few exceptions. Now, it also says, as an additional cost to play Finish, sacrifice a creature, and you can destroy target creature. Well, I'm about to make a pair of tokens with Start. So you can tell that it's meant to be played one version after the other. Or first you create the token creatures, and then you use one of them up to destroy the enemy's creatures. So I'll zoom out there. Oh, come on, I'm trying to hit the button. Okay, there we go. Okay, now I can declare blockers. One of these gets blocked. That's just a decently big creature. No big deal. I paused. Now, whenever you have anything you can use from the graveyard in one way or another, you'll see this symbol above it here. This is indicating that I can actually use one of these effects. Although right now I have to wait for my opponent's turn to fully end. So, I'll let them just kind of end that there. Goes to my turn. I get to play an extra planes. And I also get to use the effect of Finish, which allows me to use the Aftermath ability. Apparently it seems to say that I already had some things in the graveyard, which is kind of funny, because why would you even need to worry about that when this is basically just a demo? Although, whatever. Now, what you may have saw a moment ago was another thing about token creatures that I can kind of go over a bit more in detail in another lesson. But basically, whenever a token creature is destroyed or anything happens to them other than being on the field, they basically don't exist anymore. So if they're shoved back into your hand, they go poof. If they go to the graveyard, they go poof. Whatever it is, they go poof. And it's kind of beyond even regular exile because they just don't exist anymore. So it's a bit more extreme than that. Now, the thing is, as we go over this, you can kind of see that you were meant to use up one of these with one and one of these with the other. Now, the enemy only has 2 points of health remaining, so they have 2 points of life. But there is one creature in my way, and it's decently large compared to what I have here. And in fact, if they were to block each other, they kind of cancel out without even really technically dealing permanent harm. because this one can only deal 2 points of damage and this one can deal 3, and they both have 4 points of toughness, so they won't actually die. But the whole point of this particular exercise is to defeat your opponent on this particular turn. So the idea of doing that is to show how Aftermath works, and in this case, you use the ability Finish. And by the way, you have to kind of select it, and then even it'll always be this thing in red whenever you have an activatable ability. And in this case, you have to choose to use Aftermath. So this one is about to be used up. Also note that if you have a card with Aftermath in the graveyard, whenever you go through the graveyard in the graveyard browser where you're looking over what you have in yours, or for that matter theirs, since you can do that, you'll notice that it will be the other face-up, because that's the one specifically meant to be played that way. You can bring the card back from the graveyard with very particular effects without using this, but the only way you can use Aftermath and its special version is from the graveyard. Okay, there is like one other exception, but that probably won't come up for quite some time, so there's literally like one special exception that I happen to know for sure works. But in general, this is the only way that this happens. So you can kind of ignore that until the situation comes up at random later, because it doesn't have a lesson associated with it. It's just kind of a weird case. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and finish off this particular part of Amonkhet's special abilities by playing Aftermath. So, first it says choose a creature to destroy. Well, this one's clearly my way. And I have to choose one to sacrifice. Sorry, warrior creature I made before, you're kinda gone. And I attack, and this will eliminate my enemy right about here, so goodbye. And the additional tip here is, never mind that. The additional tip here is basically saying that no matter how it gets into your graveyard, you can only use that effect from it. So this means if you discard the card, or an enemy forces you to discard it, or it's placed there from other effects, like for example when things take cards from your library and put it into the graveyard, no matter what, if it's in the graveyard, you can use the Aftermath ability that way. So I'm going to go on to the next sub-lesson here from Amonkhet, and it's actually very similar. It's Embalm. The Embalm ability is kind of like how that was for instants and sorceries for the most part. This is that for creatures. And again, that icon will appear. So I'm going to kind of reveal how to do this as step-by-step in the lesson mostly. Okay, so give it a little time to read over that and or hear the voiceover if it works. But anyhow, basically said, whenever you have a creature in the graveyard that has the ability to be embalmed, then you can exile it from the graveyard and you create a special token copy of that creature. It will be white in addition to any of its, it will be white instead of its original color. It will also be a subtype as zombie in addition to any other types. It will, for the most part, have its original abilities other than Embalm, because once it's a token creature, it's pretty much removed from the game whenever it's defeated anyway. So therefore, that's kind of irrelevant because it's not going into the graveyard. Now, some other things to remember is that it's kind of where you gotta kind of pay attention to certain types of special abilities as to how they work, because some things will come into effect immediately, some are kind of over time, and kind of go over more of that later. Right now, I'm going to go over into how this particular one works. Okay. Now, in this case, I have the ability to attack, and this is a sacred cat. It has the ability to be embalmed, so it's kind of the feature presentation here. It also, and it's, might add, one of the cheaper ones to embalm, is you only pay 1 white mana for it, which is the same as its original casting cost. Usually they're more expensive to embalm than they were to originally cast. Just saying that. And this one has an ability called Lifelink, which means every time it deals damage, I gain that much life. And you can go over your starting amount with this. So that'll be demonstrated whenever I'm on the attack. The thing is, I need to hold on to this card, the Wayward Servant, because in this particular skill quest, you're doing something that it's not directly about. It's something that's indirect in terms of your victory. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Well, this is how this is kind of meant to be played out. It's that whole losing life immediately thing that you're trying to use to defeat the opponent in this skill quest. Now, the thing is, remember how I was talking about Embalm before? Well, it even describes it here. You exile it from your graveyard, you create a token that's a copy, except it's a white zombie, a cat with no mana. Well, in this case, it is a cat, but it's basically a white zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Or rather, it's always turned white, but zombie is always a secondary add-on thing. And the thing is, most token creatures have certain other things about them, although we'll go over that more later. Now, the thing about embalming is it mentions you can only do this as a sorcery, which means whenever something says you can only do something as a sorcery, it means basically only on your turn. So unless something kind of speeds it up or something, which I have not seen in Amonkhet, so that's not happening. Now, the point here is whenever it comes back into the field, it comes back as a zombie. Well, whenever a zombie enters the battlefield under your control with this card, then its effect automatically activates, and it's always good for you. So, yeah. And so this one is a nice card to have for these kind of situations. And I'm going to use this to defeat this enemy. First of all, I attack with Sacred Cat. The computer will block it. Goodbye, Sacred Cat. But only for a moment, because I need to do this immediately afterwards. I pay for the Embalm ability, and I have plenty of planes to do that, so I have lots of white mana. So, I play Embalm, it gets exiled, so you can see that secondary graveyard right there? That was lightning fast, because I was trying to point out the secondary graveyard for exiles. But the thing is, immediately afterwards, the enemy basically got defeated, because the other effect, the one from Wayward Servant, activated and drained that last point of life that the enemy had. So that was a quick defeat for them. As soon as that came into play, poof. So yeah, zombie cats. Good call there. And this is kind of like with Aftermath, as I was explaining before, and it's secondary, like after the main lesson. It's saying that again, no matter how it gets into your graveyard, you can use Embalm. So even if it's never been on the field, you can put it directly onto the field as its special embalmed version, which is a white token zombie version. So yeah. So remember, no matter how it gets there, you can do that. As long as it hasn't been exiled first, of course. because this only works from the graveyard, not the exile pile, so to speak. So, yeah. Anyhow, next. Let me do a quick thing to see if there's cycling. I don't think there is. Nope, because those are, I know for sure those are all. It describes cycling, so I guess that'll be something I just kind of mention how that goes. But instead I'll go to Exert for now, because again there's no exact lesson on that. Waiting for it. Okay. As it was basically saying here, some of the rules of Exert are special. Exert isn't in the set briefly after this. They show that Exert isn't just for while attacking, but that is how it activates in Amonkhet. So, yeah, the set right afterwards is still in that world, but it's got it where things can exert as a special cost to playing their abilities, not necessarily always doing it while attacking. But basically, any creature that's exerted will not untap in your next untap step. So that means it's been kind of used up for an additional turn compared to normal. It doesn't just turn back and go your way whenever it comes your turn again. You have to wait until the one after that. So basically, if you were to keep exerting a creature every single turn, it would go attack and exert. It would basically go exert for the extra effort, wait a turn, exert for the extra effort, wait a turn. So it would kind of go back and forth that way. Normally speaking, you don't have to worry about that. Now, another thing about it is that you can, however, bypass this ability. If you have anything that allows you to untap a creature for any reason, then you don't have to worry about that. So you can kind of bypass that with certain things, and at least one of which is in the set in and of itself. So yeah, that's always fun. And the thing is, this Amonkhet is kind of themed after the desert, so things are considered rather tiring and exhausting. So whenever a creature puts in a little extra power, they're a little tired. But yeah, so let's go over this situation. We have a couple creatures here that's on our side. We have one that's already been played, the Hooded Brawler. Whenever it says whenever you exert it, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And remember, exerting means it doesn't untap during your next untap phase. But overall, this gives you an interesting choice. Do you attack with it as a 3/2 creature or as a 5/4 creature? Because that +2/+2 will be headed on immediately whenever it's exerted before you actually determine the actual like blocking damage and stuff, or for that matter, unblock damage. So this means you can power up this creature for one turn in exchange for them not being able to be immediately available the next turn. Unless, of course, you can bypass that. So, yeah. Again, there's a lot of bypasses to the rules of Magic the Gathering, so, again, always read the cards. And we have one that I have not cast yet, the Ancrop Crasher. Ancrop Crasher is a Minotaur. So, yeah, that's nice. Minotaur Warrior. Now, this one has haste, which is something that it will be good to show here anyhow. And it has whenever you exert it, a target creature can't block until end of turn. So remember how I said you kind of gotta figure whether you want to use it or not, because there is that consequence of them being tired. Well, whenever it says target creature can't block this turn, it really means it. So therefore, if I were to cast this, then first of all, haste means it doesn't have to wait to be able to be tapped or attack. You can just do so immediately that turn. Secondly, whenever it's exerted, it will basically make it where this creature here will be unable to block the onslaught. Now, these two have a combined power rating of 6 points, and my enemy has 8 points of life left. Well, this is where this one's exerting ability comes in, because it gets a bonus of an additional 2 points. Right now, you won't need to worry about toughness, because without the other creatures being able to block after this one comes in, then that won't be a factor, because they'll just go right through. So, let's play this and show how this whole thing works. First of all, we'll watch carefully. See, there's no swirly thing. And swirly thing means that they can't be used that turn. So you can see how haste just means they can just go right off the bat. Now, because of how this works, I'm going to say attack with all. And I'll confirm. Now, here's another thing about exerting. You don't have to choose all your creatures at once. You choose individually whether or not you exert them. So, whenever you have any creature on the field in this game that has the ability to that has the ability to be exerted, then it will grant you the chance to determine which ones you'd exert. Obviously, in the actual game, it's even easier than that. You're just declaring it individually. You don't have to have some reminder pop up in real life. So, yeah. Again, some differences between doing this like with actual cards and doing it as a computer game. But anyhow, the point is that the game will ask you to confirm any creatures that you have able to exert, whether or not you'd like to. In this case, the only real way to win this skill quest is to basically go all out. So, I have to confirm them, and they will be kind of darkened whenever you select them, and that's something you might see on other cases whenever you're selecting creatures. So, right now I'm going to confirm. It says choose a creature that can't block this turn. Now here comes a little bit of classic fanciness. Shining stuff. This one has a special symbol that basically just means it can't block this turn. So this is just tagged onto it right here. And dealing damage. Goodbye. But yeah, this is saying basically how I was saying about it before. Yes, message, I remember that I'm offline. Silly internet. Storms. Sometimes knocks the net out for a while afterwards. Anyhow, the thing is that basically it's just reminding you, as I was saying before, that it can still be untapped by other things untapping it. It's just that it won't do so normally on its own. So, if my enemy had survived that round, then the next thing that would have happened is I would have them kind of left over for a while. On the other hand, normally speaking, you might have the ability to do other things to help them out, so I could have untapped them with other special abilities and things. It's just, in this exact skill quest, it didn't have any of those available. It was just kind of simplified to show what exerting can do. Now, if a creature has an ability that doesn't require it to tap, then that's another matter, because as long as an ability doesn't require a creature to tap, it can be used even while it is. So that means that a creature like that can still be useful. It's just, well, in that exact state, whenever it's tapped but not able to untap on its own the next turn, because it's been exerted, it can still be useful in other ways. It's just, again, you kind of got to go with the card. But for now, that's going to be all the lesson for now, including the little after commentary of the little bonuses you can do with things. So, yeah. So I'll go on afterwards, because some of these other things are from mostly other sets. There are a lot of general stuff, and I'll probably have a great big lesson at some point for the, tutorial for a lot of general abilities has been throughout a lot of the sets, and or have been like really old abilities that didn't go off in the what they considered the basics. So yeah, like some things that would probably, I guess you could say, would be best to group with Origins, because it's kind of a celebration of what Magic was before. and where it was going at the time. So the fact is they brought back a lot of old abilities and stuff. So therefore, yeah, probably going to do that whenever I'm doing that part. But this is more the Amonkhet group of abilities, and that's pretty much over with. Mainly just those three major things of Aftermath, basically playing a instant or sorcery from their graveyard, with the little thing that you have to exile it. Exert, meaning that your creature is a bit tired after using an ability, more so than usual. And, of course, Embalm. Heck, bring a creature back from the grave into the battlefield again as a zombie to help you out. So, yeah. So there was those three major things. And that's actually a decent amount of stuff, actually. Normally I'd do just one thing, but again, I thought to do this themed, and that's kind of what I went with. And I kind of enjoyed doing it this way, of all going with what the Amonkhet block brought in new. Or maybe occasionally rephrased. But for the most part, those were new abilities. There's not too terribly many times where you do something that similar. So, yeah. Now, this has been pretty much a good time. So, I'd just like to say this has been Glitch Reaper here. I'll be logging off. So, hope to hear from you all later. And bye for now, everybody. Not